So the only thing that we provide to the telcos is the IP address. We purposely decided not to rely on a single identifier. So at no point we consider that the IDs that we provide are anonymous.
Hello everyone, I am Sergio Maldonado and this is Masters of Privacy, a set of interviews covering the intersection of marketing, data, privacy and technology with a clear goal in mind, which is redefining the relationship between people, brands and media around transparency and control. Which is to say, we're aiming for real customer centricity, or if you will, human centricity. We regularly talk to DPOs, CMOs, CDOs and whoever else we find interesting and able to share valuable insights. So we hope you like it. Please do reach out if you have any ideas on future topics or speakers. Okay, we're going back to AdTech today, so advertising technology, to revisit a hot topic, or at least hot in the European market, which is a big new entrant in the identity space called Utiq. This is an alternative to cookie-based targeting and measurement, which is based on cross-device identifiers that are created on the back of telco operator signals, which means it happens at the ISP or network level, right? In fact, Utiq was launched in 2023 by the largest European operators, so Telefónica, Deutsche Telekom, Vodafone and Orange, working together. I've been very intrigued, and I have to say mostly worried about this initiative given the privacy track record, the poor track record of telecom operators in Spain and other countries. I mean, just look at the enforcement tracker website and the number of fines they've been receiving over the years, right? But also, given the precedent that we all have in mind, which is the super cookies launched by Verizon in the US a few years ago. Basically, cookies that could never be deleted because they would come back to life, right? They were reset at network level, and which eventually was subject to the intervention of the FCC and a fine. That said, Pascale Arguinarena is Utiq's DPO and joins us today to dispel the bad rumors and explain the efforts they are making to go the extra mile and become even more privacy-friendly than any ID-based cookie alternative out there, like those based on encrypted email addresses or phone numbers. It is up to you now to decide whether the arguments are persuasive enough to grant Utiq an opportunity. Pascale has been working in privacy and data protection ever since completing her law degree and has previously worked at fashion group Arcadia and Vodafone. She is based in London. Let's go for it. Welcome, Pascale. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Fantastic. So, I'll tell you, I've been really worried about Utiq when it first came out. And that's because I saw the background we had here in the US with the super cookies, right? So, to get started, which are the main safeguards that you've put in place faced with the potential association with those stories, right, from the world of super cookies? Why is Utiq not a super cookie?
Yeah, sure. And actually, we did face a lot of these kind of associations at the very beginning. There was, I think it was born out of perhaps a lack of understanding of how our technology works, these privacy-centric controls that we have put in place, which I will explain, which led to this, let's say, apprehension. But we here at Utiq have designed the technology to be privacy-led. and underpinned by a privacy by design approach. So we have various controls that we have implemented to try to address the main challenges and criticisms that are typical in the AdTech industry, and particularly starting from a data minimization perspective and data decentralization perspective. So what that means, to unpack it, is that, as you know, Utiq works with a number of parties, players in the ecosystem,
Yep.
including the telcos. Now, because of these concerns that we were very well aware of, we have design the technology in a way that it silos the different data processing by the different parties, and with a particular attention to the telcos. So, for example, even though the Utiq technology relies on an online identifier that is provided by the telco, the way that this identifier is generated is using minimal data. So the only thing that we provide to the telcos is the IP address, after a user has consented, of course. And then based on that IP address, they do their own processing and they generate this identifier. And this identifier does not give Utiq any way to trace it back to the customer to which it belongs. So we have no way of seeing or revealing what was used in order to create this pseudonymous ID. So that's the first thing. What it means is that we don't get information from the telco about the customer. The ID is not enriched by the telco. And at the same time, we don't enrich the ID that we receive and then subsequently generate other IDs with other data. So minimal data being processed. And the reason why it has been designed in this way is because of the view that by creating a decentralized system, it means that not all parties in the ecosystem hold all the data. They have different data, trying to break up and silo this so that it's also better controlled, because it means that the parties only receive what they need in order to carry out the activity. And another key control that has been implemented are the types of techniques used in order to generate the IDs. So, for example, pseudonymization, encryption, hashing, tokenization, all of these are used.
You do have a different ID for MarTech to deal with my first-party environments, one for AdTech to play in the real-time bidding space, right? And that those are, yeah, and maybe there's more.
So yes, so the way that Utiq works is that we have, let's say you can think about it as a layered ID approach. So we purposely decided not to rely on a single identifier, and instead the technology is underpinned by a set of different IDs that are purpose-led. So each ID has its own purpose and has its own characteristics. And this is where the privacy-centric controls come in place. So, for example, the ID that we receive from the telco, it never leaves our platform. So once we receive it, it's never shared with any other party in the ecosystem. And that's to keep it secure, even though it's pseudonymized. Then off the back of that ID, we generate another randomized ID, which then we take as the leading ID to avoid using the previous telco provided one. Okay, and this is randomized and it's only linked within our platform so that no one else can trace it back and link it as well. And then off the back of that other ID, we generate additional ones that are the ones that are actually being provided to other parties like the brands and the publishers. So we have the MarTech Pass. This is typically used for audience creation and profiling. To enable the brands to build their
Personalized
audiences.
content and
Yes, exactly. And then for that one, it has let's say a bit of a set time period to live. So it's lasting at the moment 90 days. And that period enables these brands to carry out their initiatives without overly extending the validity of the ID. So this is a way that allows to reduce the risk of these massive profile buildings that are often seen in the AdTech industry by putting some restrictions on the time to live. And then we have the AdTech Pass, which is the one that is used for the programmatic flow. So It's typically used by the publishers, and it's dynamic. So it's even shorter lived than the Martech pass. It will only be triggered on each site for the purposes of enabling the real-time bidding, for example. And the key thing about the AdTech pass as well is that it's encrypted. So even though it travels on the bit stream, it's not possible to read it or see what's within it unless you have the key. And that key is only provided to the key players that need it in order to enable the advertising activities to take place. So the DSPs and SSPs, for example.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, more.
Yeah.
There's more. I see there's more.
Yeah, there's
Bring
a
them
lot
on.
more.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that the other main thing I wanted to highlight is that the Martech Pass, apart from having the time limits and being also a pseudonymous ID, we keep other controls over it. So, for example, each Martech Pass is assigned to each website. And what that means is that website A has a Martech pass, website B has a different Martech pass. They cannot really match over it or combine them. It's only possible to have a cross-site combination, let's say, if they collect the consent of the individual on each such website, and if they're all connected, so belonging to the same group of companies, for instance, or the same data controller. So that's another limitation that is a key differentiator, because it means that you don't have a single ID that is used for audience building that is shared across all of the sites. Again, trying to limit the extent of profile building and tracking and these kind of practices that sometimes are often criticized in this industry. What else can I tell you about the IDs?
No, I thought you were going to come up with another idea.
No. I mean, we have other IDs that are purpose-led, but each one depends on the use case. So apart
Fantastic.
from Martech Pass and AdTech Pass, there are others, but yeah, they all follow the same principles.
So, has anyone, if I can start there, attempted to make the case for some of these IDs to be anonymous to the recipient, in the sense that they do not have access to the keys or to any way to bring it back, and in the sense that the way to deduplicate these IDs out there in the market is not widely available, as it would be, for example, with plain IP addresses?
So far, at Utiq, we've been very clear taking the view that it remains personal data. So at no point we consider that the IDs that we provide are anonymous, even though, as you heard, we have very explicit controls to ensure that there's limited data and data sharing, and there's pseudonymization in place. But mostly because we see that it's still a very polarized view, right? So you have certain, perhaps, regulators that might consider or take a more strict view at anonymization compared to others, also in general in the privacy industry. And I think that particularly for IDs, the fact that it enables you to track someone, single someone out, we don't know what they're going to use it for, right? So it can be combined with other personal data, and then again it brings it back to that central definition of what personal data is. And again, the GDPR itself mentions that IP addresses and online identifiers are personal data.
What do you think of this? So you're doing your homework, you're putting a lot of safeguards in place, but you're dealing with a market that is wild. Because the open programmatic ecosystem is full of people with a lot of imagination, able to put the pieces back together. And so you've got a window, a 90-day window, again, to duplicate that audience. But perhaps they're able to now see people, not because they're people, but see devices across different sites, and in a way peg them to other identifiers, or even obtain an IP address where they couldn't. Because, for example, a big advantage that I see on your end is that you've got the ability to cut through dynamic IP addresses. Many people have IP addresses because it's part of the HTTP request. but you can cut through the dynamic assignment because you've got the ISPs, right? And they can map dynamic IP addresses. So they could now use that to enrich it. Have you faced that? Have you even taken action against any bad actors, or how is your perception of that wild west out there in AdTech?
Yeah, so that's a really a big question, and it's true. That it's challenging to enter the industry as a privacy-led solution, particularly when there's so many players and everyone is doing their own thing. So at Utiq, basically, we've tried to focus on what we can do and the controls that we can put in place with regards to our own IDs, like I already explained. And we also have other measures. So we don't only consider the technical, but also from a framework or organizational perspective. So we think carefully which parties we are working with. The fact that we have the telco capabilities that underpin our technology. It is helpful, as you say, from the enabling a more deterministic ID to appear, but also from the point of view of the users. So we always try to understand the capabilities of the technology, not just from the market perspective, but from the user perspective. Because to give you an example, the fact that the telco is behind it, that we are able to link across this, so travel across these, let's say, barriers that maybe IP address would have unless you have the telco behind. It means that we can provide better control to the user in how they manage their consents, because we can always link everything back, right? And that's one key offering that we have, Consent Hub, which is the privacy portal that the user can go in a single place to understand all of the sites where they have given Utiq consent and that are actually active at the moment. So that's one of the benefits. And then as I was saying, so we try to focus on what we can do and putting in place a framework. I mean, Utiq's mission is to enable a more responsible digital marketing. And part of doing that is, for example, we have set or defined specific Utiq privacy requirements that dictate how we integrate the Utiq technology in sites. So, for example, this always goes back to the user's consent, transparency, knowledge, what they are aware of, right? So that's how we try to navigate these challenges in the AdTech ecosystem. We from the beginning try to, as I mentioned, try to address the typical pitfalls in AdTech. So by that, I mean, we put a lot of focus on the transparency, the choice, and the consent for the user. And going back to these privacy requirements, so to give you an example, one of them is that our consent text for Utiq needs to be always in the first layer. And we do this because we have the telcos, which is a new thing. So we want to make it very clear to users that telcos are involved in this initiative. We also do it to make it very clear to the user and introduce them to the Utiq technology and get this valid consent. We also have another requirement, which is that there must be a one-click reject button for the user, so that they always have the choice to not have Utiq activated. And if I didn't mention it at the start, just to be clear, Utiq is always off by default, so it requires the consent in all cases. And as I mentioned, the consent is captured per device and per browser. So if you give consent in one site, it doesn't extend to all of the other websites where we might be operating. So these are kind of like all of the different ways that we try to navigate these challenges. And again, in terms of the framework, we have other controls in place. we are very careful in making sure that we assess the roles and the data protection roles and responsibilities with all of the parties that we work with. So we have direct agreements with all of the sites and the tech vendors as well. But above all, I think like the key guiding thing is the user's knowledge, so the transparency, choice, and control, and how we give them that. So to make it very clear what is happening.
So on control, right? So to pull from that. So you're providing something unique because there's more access to, I mean, this idea of consent hub where I can see where I've consented, that is unique. It is also unique because you pose a unique challenge to control itself. Every other system up to now would give me control on my device. I can use the global privacy control signal in my browser, in many browsers. And so that is under my control. I can delete third-party cookies while they're still alive, right? I can do these things on my device, but there's nothing I can do on the telco side, on the Utiq side. So you are able to tell me what I've consented to in which websites I've done it. But again, all of these things you need to do because you've taken that away. People cannot do anything on their end. We're entirely in your hands. Isn't that true?
I don't think that's quite the case because, and I'll explain why. So even though we operate at the network level, as you say, so it's the technology is linked to the connection of the user rather than anything else. We still apply the principles that are there today in terms of managing the technology at the browser level. So apart from Consent Hub, users also are provided with a way to revoke their consents to Utiq technology within the site itself and the browser as well. So whenever a user, let's say, deletes their browser data, cleans their cookies or whatever, it will also impact Utiq technology. And the reason being is that Utiq, so we use a cookie to store on the browser the preferences of the user. And so we always check the preferences that have been given. And if we don't see that, we will ask for consent again. So obviously, the technology doesn't operate on the basis of cookies, but they are used in this way to track the consent and be able to give this browser level control. And another thing I wanted to mention is that apart from this, let's say, browser level control, as you say, the ability to just clean everything and get rid of it, which will also apply to Utiq, no doubt, is that we, as part of our Utiq privacy requirements, what I was saying before, we also ensured that there was a clear way for the user to revoke consent on the website itself, on each and every website. So it's not only Consent Hub that the user can visit to manage their consents, but also there's always a Manage Utiq link that is sitting next to the privacy statement of the website, next to the CMP of the website, that the user can click to access information. What is Utiq? How can I control this? Is it active for me? So they still have all of the same controls. And this goes back, I think, to your first question, which I don't think I answered directly, which is Utiq not a super cookie? And what's the difference, right? Because I heard from your explanation, it lives forever in the network and all of this. Going back to my introduction, Utiq does leverage the network capabilities, but it does so always with the user in mind and being privacy first. And so a key differentiation with super cookie and Utiq is that super cookies, as we know, are designed to be permanent and generally more difficult for users to detect and manage, and you can never get rid of them. So it results in a more extensive and intrusive tracking and invisible tracking of users across websites. Whereas what Utiq has done is really put themselves at the eyes of the user, saying, hey, Utiq is being used in this site. This is what it means. This is how you can control it. We don't give just one way to control it, which is the consent hub, but you also have the manage Utiq page. You can use your browser controls. You can even revoke consent via the CMP of the website. So we also have a separate purpose there that the user can see when they manage their site, in particular CMPs. So yeah, very different.
So, if you are so privacy centric, now let's look at the trade off, right? And so upfront because you ask so clearly. And real question, no dark patterns, reject all on first layer, everything is there. So, if you ask so well, why would people accept? So, my question is, your consent rates could be very low. Do you get enough of an acceptance threshold to make the ecosystem work?
Yeah, so I think that's a question more for my commercial colleagues, really. But what I can say is, and actually this is something I wanted to talk a little bit about, is we try to start doing user studies. And one of the key takeaways of one of the user studies that we had was that, and it may come as little surprise for some, but users really want to proceed quite quickly
Yes.
to their content and limiting their scope for reading. And also they tend to, their actions mirror what they typically do and they are accustomed to. So if they're accustomed to accepting, they will be accepting. It's the same for declining. And also having seen some others studies done by the regulators, for example, the ICO has done a couple of studies where they find that the users do care about their privacy, and we know that they
But
care,
they care
but
more about their
they
time.
don't show it exactly. So our job is to find a way to make sure that the user, even having all of these considerations in mind, still is informed. And yeah, so from our perspective, we've tried to leverage this. We've tried to done it from an evidence-based approach. So the user studies have really helped us to inform how we design the consent and what we say. And yeah, I would say that it's a great way to understand the user, and that's the key thing. So if you are having a text that is going to be directed at the user, it's best to get the feedback from the user that is going to be reading it to make it actually effective. And so when you ask, okay, why would they just accept, I think that that's part of the industry, like what has like the result of where we are today, right? But from the Utiq perspective, again, we try to still give the users meaningful choice by constantly iterating on our consent text, constantly iterating on the design. So one of the other key takeaways from the studies that we've conducted is that the design itself is really making a difference. So the users want something that is a call to action, really easy choices. So they want to know, what is the impact to me? Why should I care? How are you protecting my data? Rather than getting into a lot of technical explanations, which actually is something that has been challenging because our solution is so complex. It has so many elements. Yeah, but this way we iterate and we continue to try to give a text that is meaningful with a design that will resonate with the user. And overall, it's helping us to build that trust because when the users have the trust, they are more likely to be receptive. And that's also how, I guess, you get certain consent rates. It might be that they're trusting the organization. They might be trusting, how you're protecting. But of course, you need to back all of that up. And that's how what we try to do with our privacy-centric controls as well.
That's a very good point. Absolutely true. Is people trust their newspaper, their publisher, and they love it, and they know how it is. I don't know, the Financial Times or whatever. Whatever they throw at you, you just trust them. So that's so true, and you know that they would have been vetting their brokers, the CMPs, and so on. So the whole thing leads me to think that when we land on consent or pay choices, right, that's the extreme of the that sort of shows how phony some publishers and some players can be when talking about defending, advocating choice, and in the end there's no such choice because it's either pay or consent. But I'm not going to ask you that. In the end, what I want to ask you is any final thoughts, any thoughts on what you think is coming next for consumer choice, for better privacy-centric advertising or personalization or MarTech. What do you think is coming and what's exciting to you?
Yeah. So what I would say is that I think it all really leads back to the transparency, choice, and control for the user, and it links to your point. And I think that not just generally, but trying to really make it more meaningful. And for example, the user studies that I talked about, it's really worth doing those. So really putting the user at the heart of the choices that you make when it comes to the information you are providing them, the design of the choices, and having like this evidentiary basis for why and how you collect consent, right? So I think that that's a little bit lacking. More use of checking with the user and what is understandable to them, rather than trying to only focus on expectations posed by the law, by the letter of the law,
Yes.
but really leveraging more a more open approach. So talk with designers, understand how design impacts, not just from a dark patterns perspective, but really what's the evidence behind those dark patterns, what can make it better, like is it the wording, the language used, the tone of the consent. For example, in some of our user studies we found that certain tones were not the right way to go. Like, they felt a little bit like forced into consent rather than a question. So really testing and trialing all of these choices to find the way that works with your users. And I think it's always you can only consider this on a case by case basis. So it really depends on the level of processing that is being carried out. And that's why, from our perspective, we try to focus so much on these privacy centric controls to try to de risk some of the data, because trying to reduce the intrusiveness also helps with these type of challenges in terms of obtaining the right consent. So it may be that it's easier for the user to understand if it's less processing. So data minimization, I think, is another key thing, and trying to really optimize on those fronts. So user and data minimization, and always approaching it from the privacy by design, but on an evidentiary basis.
Thanks again, Pascal. Really good. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much to you.
Okay, that's all for today. Follow us on Blue Sky and in the Masters of Privacy Altogether profile, you will find the starter pack, which includes the feeds of all of our past guests. There is also a Masters of Privacy LinkedIn channel, which I invite you to follow, where you will find links to our transcripts, cheat sheets, and other surprises every now and then. Our main website is mastersofprivacy.com. Thank you for listening.